You're listening to Sox in the Basement, a production of the Broadcast Basement Limited, where every show is 30 minutes of good and comes from a basement bar on the south side of Chicago. Pull up a stool, pour a cold one, and join us right now for Sox in the Basement. Heard everywhere podcasts can be found, and always at soxinthebasement.com. I'm Chris, that's Dave. We grew up across the street from each other. We are lifelong White Sox fans. And for the last couple of weeks, buddy, I have felt bad.
Why is that?
Because we did the live show and you had a rough time getting there.
I did have a rough time getting there.
You only appeared for the last 30 seconds of the show.
At which time the DJ was playing, disco as loud as he possibly could.
And we couldn't use even any of the audio that we used afterwards, and I felt bad for you. And then last week...
I hate disco so much, by the way. I hate disco. Disco is, God, that is the worst possible thing. Like, you know what? Bless you, Steve Dahl. Bless you.
Okay.
Because I hate disco. Anyway, go ahead.
And then the other thing was, last week I loved our guest, okay? Chris Zwick was awesome from Yahoo Sports. We're definitely going to have him on again.
Yes, he was very good.
It was nice to have another perspective on. I love all the people that we have on the show, but you get a guy who is looking at things with more of a national lens. And it was also very funny that even with that national lens, his opinion of what's going on behind the scenes of the White Sox, I felt was pretty solid. It was pretty rock solid if you haven't heard that one. That's last week's show. But because of all that stuff going on, I haven't heard enough from you, Dave.
Dude, nobody wants to hear me talk. Nobody wants to hear me talking.
This is going to be some me time for me and you, okay?
Me time?
As the baseball playoffs go on, as I watch Carlos Correa come up in the 11th inning the other night with the first pitch and send it out. And I guess there was a feed even in New York where they didn't get back from the commercial quick enough. So in New York, Yankee fans were greeted as they came back from commercial with just the ball sailing out, and Astros fans, they didn't even see the pitch.
That is horrible.
What a horrible way to watch yourself
awful.
lose a game in the postseason. That's what they saw. And I watch it and I think to myself, we are still so far away from that. There is some talent and there's some excitement, but we are so far away from that.
Well,
and we need to make some moves. But I want to hand the show to you today. I want to talk about what you want to talk about.
Don't hand it necessarily to me. I mean, so first of all, I got to confess, I have not been watching a lot of the MLB postseason.
It's okay.
My bad. Man, Blackhawks are back, hockey's back, so I mean that's my jam.
Right.
But anyway, I've been looking around, so some things this week that I've read about White Sox baseball that just kind of I wanted to bring up. So first of all, if I don't believe we've got a chance to talk about it yet, but the Frank Menechino hiring.
No, we didn't talk about it. We talked a little bit about why we thought they got rid of the hitting coach, but I had to cut it from last week's show. So just to kind of reiterate something that we never got to put up on the podcast last week, I felt like this was Ricky Renteria finally saying, he knows that his butt's on the line. And I think that you could see that in interviews at the end of the season. He talked with Jason Benetti and everything like that. He knows his butt's on the line. He probably pushed for a change, or maybe this change was going on in the background over the last year, because remember, Menechino is really an outside hire. They bring him in and they put him in AAA for 1 year so they can figure out if he meshes with them, and then they elevate him.
Well, that's what I was going to say. I mean, so those of you who are not familiar with Frank Menechino, was drafted by the White Sox, actually. And when I saw that, I was just kind of like, oh boy, here we go. But then, played for the A's, the Blue Jays. He was the hitting coach for the Marlins for a while, from 2013 to 2018. So, and then he did the job in Charlotte for a year with the White Sox. Here's the two reasons why I really like this hire. Number one, here's a guy who's done the job before, who's qualified to do the job. All right. He's got 5 years plus as a hitting coach. The other thing I really like about this hire is the fact that he has spent time in AAA Charlotte with the people that, the talent that we either have brought up or going to be bringing up this year. So I really do like this hire, because a long time ago, if you recall, we talked about this, how you felt that the coaching staff or certain coaching staff should be promoted as the talent is promoted. And with this, that you kind of see that.
Well, what I like about him is a couple things. I like the fact that he is credited for turning Giancarlo Stanton into a beast. I remember we talked about the Giancarlo Stanton thing. It was right towards the beginning of this show when we first started Sox in the Basement. I was marveling over the idea that all you had to do was just kind of change that guy's batting stance. And he's the one who went and changed his stance to a closed stance. He went on a tear. He went absolutely insane to the point where the Marlins were able to move him on. You know, like he became like a sought-after thing that the Yankees went and grabbed up. I also don't think he was out in Miami because of anything he did. I think he was out in Miami because there was massive turnover going on in Miami because Derek Jeter's in there making his own thing.
Oh, right.
So I don't blame. I don't think the guy was ousted because he was doing a bad job there. In fact, there's several good hitters out there that, and Miami had a few really good hitters. I mean, JT Realmuto. Here's a guy who came of age with Menachino as his batting coach. And so he's had some nice results. And the other thing is, I complain all the time, when was the last time you saw a White Sox coach be credited for a major turnaround of a player? I mean, Cooper didn't.
Well, yeah,
Cooper didn't fix Giolito, remember?
No, but listen. Cooper has the track record. I mean, albeit,
but it's been a while.
It's been a while.
Been a while since somebody has said.
But he has the track record.
It's been a while since somebody said though that Cooper has fixed somebody, and so you wonder.
Now, I'm really curious to see some more long-term results or some larger sample size with Zach Collins, because we've talked about this. How Zach Collins, they brought him up. He was doing things his way. They brought him up to show him that doing things his way was not going to work. They sent him back down. Spent more time under Frank Menachino, getting tutelage from him, presumably. When he came back up at the end of September, had a decent, respectable run of things for a few weeks there. I'm really curious to see the long-term benefits of that experience.
Well, here's the thing
with Collins,
and that's exactly what I was trying to get to. Menachino's, I imagine him down in AAA talking to the front office about Zach Collins, saying he's not listening to me. And then him coming up and not performing. And them going, now go back and listen to this guy, because that's why we brought him into the organization. Because I think when the White Sox bring this guy into the organization, they're thinking to themselves, this could be the next hitting coach on our major league club. I believe from the moment he was hired that this was something that they were looking to do, but they wanted to give him a year. They wanted to see, does he mesh with what we're doing? Does he bring results? He did enough that they changed not only their hitting coach, but the guy that was assisting their hitting coach. Right. They got rid of anybody in there that had anything to do with hitting at the major league level, and they're going to let Menachino run the whole thing. And so that, to me, then Collins goes back down, listens to Menachino. Again, it justifies what's probably going around in the heads of the White Sox brass, like, yes, this is the guy. We did the right thing by picking him up. We did the right thing by putting him in AAA, and now we're going to definitely make him the major league hitting coach. So I like the hire just as much as you like the hire.
Yeah,
I think. And here's what else I like. I like when you look at his results, the guy adds power, and so I'm okay with it. And I know that there's an argument of, well, look at what Moncada did, look at what Anderson did. You're taking away the hitting coach that was there. Recent comments by Ricky Renteria suggest to me that he was just as involved, if not more involved, as their hitting coach, as their guy who was talking to them about what their approach was, than anybody. So I don't think you're going to have anybody step back who was doing well. I think you're going to see improvement with other guys. And I think when Luis Robert gets up here and Nick Madrigal get up here, they got the hitting coaches they were with at the end of the year in AAA. That could only be a bonus.
Well, it's going to be a smoother transition for Luis Robert and Nick Madrigal also. I mean, that...
We always talk about how the Twins have the Twins way, right?
Yes.
And how annoying it is the White Sox don't have a White Sox way. They went and they grabbed it.
They have a White Sox way, but it's not,
But they go and they grab a guy from outside the organization who's got something to bring to the table, give him a year to make sure he meshes with them, because that's how everything works in the White Sox. You got to make sure the guy's cool, too. Like, you can have a conversation with him. I don't know what they need to look at.
He's got to be fam.
Hey, thanks for listening. If you're into podcasts and you like beer, craft beer reviews, craft brewery tours, fatherhood, drunken singing, outrageousness, late 1990s morning radio, trapped 20 years later at a 9-foot homemade oak bar, the original Broadcast Basement podcast is still available everywhere podcasts can be found, and always at broadcastbasement.com. And it is still 30 minutes of good in a world of dumb, with a new on-demand episode every Thursday. Maybe listen to it after this show, which continues now.
When you talk about how, we are not there yet.
We are a long way from there when you watch the Major League Baseball playoffs.
True. But in my mind, there are two major positions that you absolutely have to fix this year. And you're going to have to go outside the organization to fix it, presumably.
I see four things that you need on this team. 2 starting pitchers, or a starting pitcher. You need a starting pitcher / relief pitcher that could start off the year filling a role until Kopech and Rodon are up. And you need another starter.
Yes.
And then you need 2 positional players.
Well, that was the thing I was going to bring up. I mean, for me, you definitely need to get some starting pitching. You have to.
Right.
You cannot go into next year with what you had last year and expect to do anything. That is not going to happen. So what I have for you is, in just a minute here, I do have a list of some free agent pitchers, and I want to just pick your brain to see how realistic an option any of these players are. But the other thing that you desperately need is you got to get somebody in right field, because right field was not happening last year.
You need a better bat out there. You need something.
So just sort of looking at the list of starting pitchers that are available, and this is pretty much your MLB top 10. Okay. I want to run these names by you, Chris, and I want to see what you think if any of these players are going to be in a White Sox uniform next year.
Yeah.
Garrett Cole.
No,
absolutely not.
And the reason Garrett Cole's not going to be in there is because the White Sox won't give him the money that he needs to get. He's a pipe dream for White Sox fans who believe the money will be spent. These are the same people that every time they hear this on the show write me angry messages on Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram and send me private messages that I'm too negative because I don't believe they're going to get Garrett Cole. And they said their money will be spent and we'll get Garrett Cole. They're not getting Garrett Cole. Garrett Cole there's going to be a bidding war for his services. The White Sox don't give long-term contracts to pitchers. They're not getting Garrett Cole.
So moving on. Does Steven Strasburg, A, opt out, and B, end up in a Sox uniform? Any chance?
I don't know. It'll be interesting because look how good the Nationals are all of a sudden after they got rid of Bryce Harper last year, and something happened with this team. I mean, look, they're gonna probably end up in the World Series. They might, by the time this show posts, they might have swept. I mean, that's where we're at right now. And so, but I think it makes sense for them to opt out because there'll be money on the table, and because the Nationals still went back at Harper with a really big deal last year after he chose free agency and shopped himself around. The Nationals are not going to ignore Strasburg and not offer him anything if he opts out. He might as well opt out and test the market.
Okay.
Now, do I think the White Sox are going to be able to get him? I don't think so.
No, I don't think so either.
I think here's a guy who's going to command more years than the White Sox will commit to with pitchers. I don't even know if it's money with the White Sox with pitchers. It's years. Jerry doesn't like to give more than 3 years to a pitcher. He's been burned too many times in his mind.
Yeah, I mean, once. But anyway. No, dude, it's Jamie Navarro.
I know.
That's what it is.
I know.
Anyway, Madison Bumgarner.
Well, here's a guy who's actually a possibility for the Sox. I think he's a possibility.
Okay.
I think that the White Sox might get him. I don't know if I want him. See, Madison Bumgarner has been different ever since he was used up a lot in his youth. He does not post those spectacular Madison Bumgarner numbers. Now, is he going to be worth being in your rotation? Yes, he's definitely an addition. He's a veteran. You don't expect him to be the ace of your staff, but you would expect him, though, to be a presence on your staff and get you some quality games. And he's going to go on a run at some point during the year and be awesome. And then he's gonna struggle a little bit and be more of a bottom end rotation starter. So it depends on the money he's asking for and whether or not the White Sox can get a deal for him. He's a possibility I'd be okay with.
He is 30 years old. His 2019 stats, he has a 3.9 ERA, 203 strikeouts with 207.2 innings.
What's his whip?
I do not have his whip in front of me. I apologize.
I'll look that up while we're talking here. But yeah.
But the one thing here is that he is what's interesting about what I see here is that he will eat you some innings. He's got over 200 innings. So that to me is definitely something the White Sox could use, is an innings eater like that.
Yeah, and he had a 1.127 whip. He's still a really quality starter. He would be a really nice addition to your staff. I think you get a veteran who has gone to multiple postseasons, won multiple championships. He would be a really nice target. If they added him, I'd be pumped.
What do you think of, so moving on here, Dallas Keuchel?
Well, there's a guy that we didn't like last year.
Right, nobody liked him.
Okay, now if you get Dallas Keuchel for just a couple years, I wouldn't have a problem with it. I mean, Chris Zwick said it last week on the podcast. I wouldn't have a problem with a couple of years to fill a role on the team. But if you're paying him ace money, I don't think he's worth it. And if he's still looking for ace money and ace years, then no.
So 31 years old, basically sat on his couch for half of last season. He's only got 112 plus innings. So
I would take Keuchel I would take Bumgarner over Keuchel.
Yeah,
personally, I like him better.
I would definitely.
I would if they're worth the same amount of money, that I go after Madison. Now, can I throw a name out there that you haven't gotten to yet?
Yeah, sure.
That I really like.
Sure.
Myself and Steve Perodzinski talked about this a couple of weeks ago when we were live at Cork and Kerry at the park with Ron Kittle and the guys from the 108. I like the name Alex Wood. And I like Alex Wood because Alex Wood can be a starter and be effective and then can move into the bullpen and be an effective guy out of the bullpen. And I think he's a really good target to go and get because you're not going to start the season with Kopech or Rodon. And when Kopech gets back, he's going to be on an innings limit. And when Rodon gets back, he's going to be on an innings limit. And you're going to need a guy who could be effective and move back and forth between the bullpen and starting role and is not going to be very expensive. And I think that's a nice name that the White Sox, I would think, should be exploring. I would not mind seeing an Alex Wood in a White Sox uniform next year.
Now, I've got a couple of other names here for you that when I sort of looked at this list that jumped out to me and said, when I saw these names, I was like, oh, yeah, well, that would be a White Sox thing to do.
Okay, so now you have a negative view of these guys.
Not necessarily.
You're like, this is all we're ending up with. That's what it is?
Not necessarily, but I think that out of the list that, we're looking at here, these are two very realistic options.
Okay.
Given given the way the White Sox typically do things. Rich Hill.
Dick Mountain?
You like some Rich Hill.
I mean, I just like the idea that we get like an entire season of people calling him Dick Mountain. Like, I would think that was awesome. I don't know if I like Rich Hill because I don't know if Rich Hill's got any more left in him.
39 years old.
Again,
Chris.
He'd be a guy that would be a bridge to the Kopech Rodon, not a guy I would rely on for the whole season.
See, to me, that fits the Kenny Williams mantra of, hey, I'm going to get a guy who once was awesome, but now he's past his prime. So, yeah, I'm going to try to see if Coop can resurrect him.
No, I don't think he's a resurrection project. He's what he is. He's not going to be changed by anybody. He's old enough now that he could be a coach. And this would be his last stop on a 1-year deal. So no, I mean, I'm not super excited if you get him unless you missed out on a guy like Alex Wood, and he's got to fill that role where he's only there for some spot starts, and you're hoping that once you get Kopech up there, you're barely using the guy.
Now let me ask you this question: does Jose Quintana opt out of his contract?
Wouldn't that be great?
And then we pick him up.
I'd be okay with it.
I mean,
I really would be.
He had a bad year last year, but he's only 30 years old.
Think about how comfortable he was within this organization.
Yeah,
and just for the thrill of getting him back, and all of a sudden he turns it around. He becomes Jose Quintana, what Jose Quintana was before we traded him to the Cubs. And then we have Eloy
and Cease.
And Cease
I was just looking at that.
Wouldn't that just be fun for White Sox fans? I would again. That's one of them where if it happened, I'd chuckle.
If you wanted to have, because here's why I find Jose to be an interesting possibility should he choose to opt out. Number one. This would be so Reinsdorf because we know he's always having a pissing match with the Cubs, and Kenny's the same way. So he would love nothing more than to basically, get Jose Quintana back and have gotten Eloy Jimenez and Dylan Cease for basically nothing. And the other thing is, it's just I keep coming back to this, but he's an ex-White Sox. And we all know how the organization is about ex-White Sox, Chris. So, I'm not saying it's a I'm not saying it's a negative, because I agree. I think if Jose Quintana were to opt out and the White Sox were to pick him up, he would fit the bill with what they need perfectly.
Well, here's the
thing.
And
he would be comfortable. But I just have a feeling that they would go and do the right thing for the wrong reasons.
Here's the thing. I look at Jose Quintana's last season here with the Chicago Cubs, and the thing that stands out to me is that his ERA was a 4.68.
Yes.
And his FIP was a 3.80. Now, just to explain what a FIP is for anybody, that's your fielding independent pitching. It measures the pitcher's effectiveness at preventing home runs, walks, hit by pitches, and causing strikeouts. The way it is set up is that the MLB average FIP will end up being the same as the MLB average ERA, which means if you have a low FIP, lower than your ERA, you are unlucky. Your fielder's screwed up. His FIP is nearly a full point lower.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Now, think about this. That means that he was actually far more effective independent of the guys around him during last season. That's a resurrectable baseball player. That's a guy who you always talk about regression. He has the possibility of doing the opposite of regression. And you could actually get him at a better price because of how he pitched over the last 2 years.
Yes.
And so
he's still, and I mentioned this, he's still young. He's only 30 years old.
He would be a very interesting pickup for the White Sox that I would not hate in any way whatsoever.
No, not at all.
I mean, think about it. Remember, there was a point where Jose Quintana was the best pitcher on your staff after they got rid of Chris Sale.
Right.
Now you'd be bringing back Jose Quintana, and you wouldn't be expecting him to be your ace. You'd be just looking for Jose Quintana to fit in somewhere in the middle and bring you the kind of things that he used to bring you when you didn't have a team around him. And he would have great games and you couldn't get any runs. This team produces runs.
Yeah.
He wouldn't be a bad pitcher.
And
he knows how to pitch in our ballpark.
They sort of mentioned too, like, Jose's inflated numbers have a lot to do with just with the Cubs collapsing as a whole.
Right.
At the end of the year. So.
And you also have to think of this, and this is going to be an interesting thing to get away from the pitching for just a moment. This could be an interesting thing for the White Sox here in the offseason. Major League Baseball during the season clearly had juiced balls. This was like the steroid era this year with the amount of home runs that are being hit.
Oh, yeah. And pitchers have complained about it, too.
Now in the postseason, multiple managers in front of microphones on multiple teams explaining that multiple guys who are sitting there looking at the analytics are saying that the ball is traveling 5 or more feet less in distance on average, that they're actually playing their outfielders in more, and home runs have been basically cut in half.
Interesting.
Now
does that have anything to do with the cold weather, though?
No. In fact, a lot of these games, especially were played like in Atlanta. There have been a lot of games in good climate weather, and it's even showing up there. So there has been an argument, well, there's more wind because it's the fall. I believe, and a lot of people believe, that Major League Baseball turned baseball back into baseball for the postseason. Now, all of a sudden, just going 3 true outcome and try and hit bombs doesn't work as a strategy. And a guy like Jose Quintana would be extremely valuable. And remember, Quintana pitched inside of Wrigley Field. To give you an idea of what Wrigley Field does, especially in this modern era, Nick Castellanos, a free agent that I want nothing to do with. There are people who think I'm crazy for this, but I want nothing to do with him. All of a sudden becomes a massive power hitter well above his career numbers when he gets traded to the Cubs. But if you would have taken Nick Castellanos' home runs and charted them out inside of Detroit, almost all of them that he was hitting in Wrigley would be landing on the warning track. He got changed to a different ballpark in an era, in a year, where the ball was traveling 5 or 6 more feet. There were extra home runs added on to his numbers, and that's extra home runs against a guy like Quintana. That's a change in how it's working for Quintana, and it changes how I would rather lean towards wanting a guy like Quintana on my pitching staff than a guy like Castellanos on my hitting staff, because I don't know what the baseballs are going to be like next year. And I don't know if I would much rather, looking at Quintana's FIP, say I would rather have him than a guy like Castellanos who benefited from something you don't know what the balls are going to be like next year.
So to move on to Castellanos and this sort of trio of right fielders, because now that was going to be the other thing that I felt needed a major upgrade on your team is right field.
I I love when you pound on the bar when you're excited.
No, I was just tapping. Everything that is local and mainstream that we know that the White Sox have some sort of influence over. They mentioned Castellanos, they mentioned Puig, they mentioned Marcell Ozuna. But then there's a big but, right? Like
Ozuna, by the way, has over 1,000 OPS here in the postseason.
Oh, I know, but they're not going to get. They're
over
not
1,000. I know his defense is sometimes suspect,
but they're not going to get. Listen, they're not going to get any of these three guys, and here's why.
Imagine Ozuna as your DH, and then you go get a left-handed guy out of right field. Think about that.
Yeah, but dude,
and then you could bring in Ozuna to spell guys in the outfield. Just use him as a bat that every once in a while goes out there and plays because you need a DH and a right fielder. Okay. I mean, I'm not in on Castellanos, and I used to be a big fan of Puig, and I'm falling off on the whole Puig thing because I just don't see it in the numbers that it's worth it.
I think as far as DH, what they're planning, at least from everything that I'm reading, is you're going to have Zach Collins in there lot, and you're going to shuffle Eloy in and out of that spot, and then occasionally James McCann.
Okay, but if you're doing shuffling of Eloy, you're going to need another outfielder, and you can never have too many bats, and I would still want them to pick up a DH to go with an outfielder. So now, if you don't think it's these three guys who are right-handed hitters, then like we go back to what I said. It's Corey Dickerson because he's a left-handed bat, or you have to make a trade. Like, here's the thing. The White Sox are either going to give you Corey Dickerson out there, who, once again, you could apply the Castellanos thing to him because you don't know what the baseball is going to be like next year, and he only played half a season, so you're extrapolating numbers to get big home run numbers out of him. Or the White Sox have to go out and make a trade.
The two names,
and I'm not sure if they're going to make a trade because they seem so hesitant to do it. But you could package some of these guys that are that are mid-tier prospects that still have some shine on them and deal them. I'm not saying Robert. I'm not saying Madrigal. I'm not saying any of these big names. I'm saying you could put together 3-4 guys and find yourself a left-handed guy who could play the outfield.
The two names that keep getting kicked around are Cole Calhoun and, as you had mentioned, Corey Dickerson.
Yeah, but I hate the Cole Calhoun talk.
And you're not a fan of either.
Well, no. First of all, I'm not a big fan of Cole Calhoun. We've gone over his numbers before here on the show, and I just don't think that it's. Secondly, I don't even know if he's going to be available. He's got an option. Everybody talks about Cole Calhoun like he's in control of his fate. He's not in control of his fate. If his team decides to keep him, he's kept. So you don't know what's going to happen here in the offseason. So you keep talking about Cole Calhoun. You don't even know if he's going to be available. So in reality, it's Dickerson are going out making a deal. I look at there's another interesting name. There is another interesting name. Okay. Which would be a fill-in in the outfield. But he's a left-handed outfielder. Brett Gardner of the New York Yankees. Now he's 36. He did $7.5 million last year. He's represented by an agent that's not Boris or Lozano.
That's helpful.
Okay. He only had 249 last year, but he had an OPS 826 and he hit 25 bombs. And he had a 3.8 wins above replacement, which actually places him pretty high amongst outfielders and just free agents in general. Not at the top, but in the upper half. Now you got age. And you're not going to get the big average. But he's a lefty if they really insist on a lefty. You know how much I hate this insisting on a lefty thing.
I know.
But he's a lefty, so if you're insisting on a lefty, you could sit around, you could talk about him. But here's my thing. In reality, what you want the White Sox to do if they insist on a left-handed bat to be in right field, that they make a deal. That they acquire somebody that they can use for a couple of years. And that's what you want them to go and do. You want them to go and make a move like that and bring it and find a guy that you think you can make a deal to acquire because it's slim pickings right now in the free agent market.
If you want a left-handed bat.
Right, if you want a left-handed bat. Now there's plenty of other guys you can go and get that aren't left-handed bats that are going to be out there. You can go find, there's all kinds of guys you can go get. It depends on whether or not you're willing to give up on this left-handed bat thing. I don't think they're willing to do that.
No.
I think that knowing the White Sox and their MO, they want a lefty. And so that's what we're going to have them go after. So I think that's going to be one of the more interesting things to watch. I think if they don't sign Dickerson or Brett Gardner or Cole Calhoun if he becomes available by the winter meetings, then they are looking for a trade.
Yeah.
Because it's such slim pickings, you got to get out there and get them right away. And these guys are not high-level guys, so they're not going to be sitting around trying to get the greatest contract ever. They're going to take the first thing that's reasonable that makes sense for them, that's in their wheelhouse.
That's what I was going to ask you. I mean, are any of these guys the type of guys that are going to be able to hold out until spring training?
No, because these guys are more along the lines of like a Josh Donaldson had to wait forever to get his money, okay?
Right.
That's the thing. I just don't see... I don't see them being guys that you're going to have to wait forever on. So I think if the White Sox don't make an early signing with them, then the White Sox are at least exploring a trade while they're talking to them. So I kind of want them to not make the move right away. Either do it right away and get the guy you want and stand there confidently and tell me this is the guy, or make a deal.
Well, by this point, here, and this is the other thing, like, we're talking about trades. There's been,
and I hate trying to propose trades because they're all pie in the sky fantasy baseball things.
Right.
Like whenever everybody's like, "Well, who would you trade for?" I don't know who's available. on what team.
Can't. You can't.
And it's impossible to go out and do.
Here's the thing. You get a lot of pushback when you start talking about dealing prospects.
They're not all going to be good.
But number one, they're not all going to be good. Number two, if you're talking about 2020 is now, 2021 is now. I'm sorry, but you have a pretty good idea at this point about what prospects you have down there that are going to end up making this team and the ones who are not.
Let's go through some prospects. Steele Walker. Would you trade Steele Walker if it gave you a really good left-handed power hitter out in right field?
Yes.
Would you trade Luis Gonzalez if it gave you a good left-handed power hitter in right field for this year?
Blake Rutherford.
Would you trade Blake Rutherford if it gave you a really good left-handed power hitter in right field?
We would have done it last year, remember?
Right. I mean, would you trade Dane Dunning for a left-handed power hitter in right field?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so look, you might find a team that's sitting there right now trying to figure out what they want to do. Look, Major League Baseball every year is flush with teams that are trying to reload or rebuild.
And we talked about it. Two-thirds of the league is rebuilding every year.
Start dumping some of these guys into their systems, make them super excited about it, and grab what they have talent-wise, because your rebuild is over, and it's time for you to get ready to compete. Your manager's ready to compete. You listen to your manager talk. Your manager is ready to compete. Your fan base is ready to compete.
The GM has been saying 2020 forever.
If you get to Sox Fest and you hear the phrase year 4 of a rebuild, you should start booing immediately.
Yeah.
It should be the most contentious Sox Fest in history. Then they'll be happy they went to 2 days instead of 3. Okay? The first time you hear the phrase year 4 of a rebuild at Sox Fest, everybody should lose their crap.
Everybody should walk out the door.
There should be booing. There should be hissing. There should be moaning. There should be yelling. There should be complaining. They should be so uncomfortable up on the stage, they cancel it for the next year. That's how it should go. If you hear the phrase year 4 of a rebuild, there are pieces to go get them. Let's go. I'm ready.
Yeah.
Okay?
Absolutely.
I'm watching playoff baseball. I want to get back there. Let's go. It's been too freaking long. I'm sick of on this date in White Sox history, and there's a replay of the World Series.
Oh,
I want to go back.
Sox in the basement. Sox in the basement. Sox in the basement.
Sox in the Basement. Heard everywhere podcasts can be found, and always on soxinthebasement.com.